When is the last time you listened to a podcast about web development, web design, and small business and didn't fall asleep? Yes, we cover web development, web design, and small business, but like actual human beings with personalities. If you're a beginner, we're not going to talk over your head. It's more like asking your buddy for help. We have guests, we have fun, and let me tell you, these two can get off on a tangent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HTML All the Things Podcast. This is Matt Lawrence and Mike Curran.
That's right, everybody. We are back, and this is the HTML All the Things Podcast. This episode is titled Things I Wish I Knew Before Becoming a Web Developer. So in this episode, Mike is going to talk about how he would have, if he could restart today, wipes all his web development knowledge, except for these tips. He would implement these tips and hopefully become a better developer. It's sort of a hindsight is 2020 kind of episode. So if this sounds interesting to you and you want to support the show, you can go check us out on that Patreon, leave a review or rating on your podcast app, join us in our Discord server, or share this with your friends. And a reminder that if you also want to support the show, you can do so by learning how to code on Scrimba. Scrimba has an interactive media player code editor where you can pause what the instructor is doing, interact with the code right in the media player, play with it, break it, figure out exactly what is going on, get your bearings, and then continue watching and listening to the lesson. Go check that out. That affiliate link will be in the show description, as well as on the show notes on htmlallthethings.com. So Mike, if you needed to become a web developer today, if for some reason it hadn't happened, but you knew these tips, these things would help you become a better developer, enlighten us on how you would get started.
Yes. So becoming a web developer, I think, has taught me a lot of things. What I've kind of reminisced on for the past couple weeks or so is essentially what I've done wrong, just to kind of move forward in a better way. And that's what this episode came from, right? Like I was just like, okay, well, I did these things wrong. I've remedied that along the way. Like some of these tips and things I'm going to be talking about, I've implemented maybe even like a couple years ago, but I wish I implemented it earlier on, right? Like I wish I started with this set of knowledge, obviously. And like Matt mentioned, hindsight is 2020. So like nothing's ever going to be perfect. But if you're listening to this and you're just starting out, I'd highly recommend listening to at least some of these tips or most of these tips and really implementing them into your own journey earlier than I did. Because I can guarantee you will become a better developer than me faster. That's almost 100% guarantee. If you listen to this episode, implement these tips. So let's dive right in. First tip here is learn your tools. So I think Matt and I started out early on when Notepad++ was a common tool used by web developers. Like that was a thing that, you just throw in an HTML file, some JavaScript files, and you write in there. There wasn't hardly any IntelliSense or none at all. There was hardly any really real things that could help you in your editor. You just write the code and hope that it works and, launch it on your browser and that's it. And then edit as you see fit with the errors that you get. As we progressed, we moved on to different editors. I know like Matt tried a few different ones. For me, I moved mostly to, I think it was WebStorm at some point, and then I moved quickly from WebStorm to VS Code when it came out. And I've been stuck with VS Code for a long time, not really needing to move because it's fine. What I didn't do, what I wish I did, was I didn't really learn VS Code. And what I mean by that is that VS Code has a lot of built-in functionality, built-in really good shortcuts, like a really good set of shortcuts that allow you to like select everything to the end of the line, select and not character by character, by word, copy line above, copy line below, find next occurrence of the certain word that you have highlighted, highlight the next occurrence, highlight all occurrences, all of those things. If you learn them early on, and I'm not saying like learn every single one of them right away, because that's kind of overwhelming, but learn the ones that make sense for you, know that they exist, and then start implementing like one or two a week. I don't know how you would go about it. Like just try different ones and then get them into your workflow. Get the shortcuts into your workflow. The less time you spend taking your hands off the keyboard to the mouse, the faster you'll code. I know that this is like maybe kind of like a sweaty thing, like a neck beard thing, whatever you want to call it. Like people often like make fun of the developers that are only on the keyboard and refuse to use the mouse. But the reality is that there's a reason for them doing that. The more you can embrace that kind of keyboard warrior culture, I guarantee you it'll improve your productivity. Not everything is about writing code for sure. Like it is one of the more important things, but it's not everything. But if you can write code a little bit faster, if you can, instead of like, dicking around with the editor, if you can really embrace the editor, learn the ins and outs, I can guarantee you'll be a more productive developer. Like it's a one-to-one thing. You will get faster. Faster typers are faster at writing code most of the time, even because what comes up in your head, you can get out faster on the page, right? A lot of times, if you're a slow typer, like, yeah, you can still you can still solve all the problems. You can still do it. You can still do it the way I did it with just like the mouse and keyboard combination. I didn't use that many shortcuts. I used very few. But I did notice myself increasing my velocity as I started to learn them. And I really only embraced that maybe like a year ago or 2 years ago on my like 8-10 year journey, which is unfortunate.
This is something that I'm doing right now, not learning VS Code in particular or anything like that, but I'm starting to automate things. There's a lot of processes involved in web development, but there's also a lot of processes in content creation. And one of the things that I've noticed is that I always do things the manual way. And that is not as efficient as it could be, not as productive as it could be, but it does work if you are doing 1 or 2, maybe 3 different sorts of tasks. But as the projects and other sort of tasks stack up and it starts becoming like a bit overwhelming, it's really annoying to have to export this audio, then go over here and upload it here. Oh, also upload it here. Things that are redundant or could be automated really should be automated at that point. And it's almost weird. It's almost like a weird feeling for me personally, where you kind of see this on reality shows. Actually, is kind of a weird comparison, but you kind of see this on reality shows where, there's a failing business and the business, someone comes in to fix it, and the owner is having trouble delegating. It's like I'm almost having trouble delegating some of my tasks to automation. Weirdly, I don't have problems really delegating tasks to other people, but I just have this strange like, oh no, this is how I do it. It's kind of, I'm stuck in my ways. I don't want to delegate it to a machine, or don't worry, I'll just copy paste that over and stuff like that. Like those type of tasks that don't need to be done manually are things that I'm working on now. For example, Mike and I have been trying to get the YouTube sort of podcast / YouTube music thing kind of sorted out, because it's a bit of a mess. There's a couple of weird bugs in there that I'm having one weird bugs with one channel and another weird bugs with another channel. It's kind of a mess. And we were just like, you know what? Maybe we need to start leaning on the fact that which one of these procedures is the easiest and most acceptable. Like you guys can still listen to it on YouTube Music and on YouTube if you want, but we need this to be automated. I can't be going in, publishing the episode, publishing the show notes, but then also, going into YouTube and constantly maintaining that, because I'm going to forget 1 week. And if I do that, now the release dates are messed up and, it's a big mess. And so this is absolutely something that, as a developer, but also like, I don't know if you'd call it like a modern developer or something, but Mike and I have preached on the show before, hey, you can get a lot of connections and things like that by making content. And it also is sort of like a portfolio piece in a way. If it is, say, web development content, you're trying to get a web development job, having things be automated where possible just makes a lot of sense. Like just something as simple as just sort of like an example is, if you were to post the same caption on Instagram and the same image on Instagram as you would on Facebook, it's like, why not, use Creator Studio and schedule them together? Unless there is a specific reason why you don't want to do that, why not do that? It just doesn't really make sense. Or if you have spare time today, you don't have spare time on, I don't know, Saturday or something, but you need to post some stuff on Saturday. Why not write it today and have it scheduled so you don't even have to think about it for the rest of the week, and then it just gets automatically released on LinkedIn or wherever you've scheduled it. It's just using tools, better. Obviously, Mike talked about the development tools. I'm talking more from the creator angle, but it's the same principle applies.
Yeah, exactly. And you can do the same things with the developer stuff, like automating different tasks. It's totally a relevant application. Like automation is becoming more and more a thing nowadays. And the thing that I wanted to talk about next, in fact, was AI. That's obviously a newer tool, but learning how to take advantage of that to the best of your ability is also going to help you a ton early on your journey. This isn't something that I could have done. Like, it doesn't particularly apply to this episode, maybe, because it's not something I could have done 5 or 8 years ago. But if I was starting today, I would definitely take advantage of it. Right? Like we had episodes before where we talked about, hey, like junior developers don't rely on ChatGPT to write your code, but as a coding assistant, right? As something to review your code, as pair programming, like if you take it out of the context of just autocomplete and you put it into the context of helping you write better code and understand concepts better, AI is absolutely something you should be using right now. Like don't limit yourself just because of the idea that it could backfire or whatever. Like, you know, all new tools have their disadvantages. All new tools have their thing. But if you don't learn how to use it right now, it's going to put you at a disadvantage, guaranteed. Like when you're going into the workplace and you can't rely on autocomplete, like, you know, co-pilots or whatever, but you absolutely can use them to be a better coder and faster. You need to understand what it's writing for you, but it can write some really good code if you let it. And if you can guide it. So, you know, turn it on and off, have, you know, your time of coding without it, but sometimes turn it back on, even with the autocomplete, and see what it can do. And then make sure that it's like doing the right things. When you start understanding what is right and what is wrong, it becomes a really good tool. Like it accelerates your development significantly.
Well, we've had not sort of, but we literally have had coverage on AI and its productivity and its use cases on the website. And, you know, one of our contributing authors, you know, Michael LaRocca, like he was exploring sort of like pair programming, almost like treating the AI as a mentor that works with you, you know, on an ongoing basis. And I know that some people might go like, well, just get like a real person, this and that. But the thing with real people is that real people, you know, they're real people. They have schedules, they have lives, whatever. And so it's hard to get them to be there at the same time. And if you're a person that, you know, let's say is not working in the industry, because if you're working in the industry, maybe you and the other person are on the same sort of shift or on the same sort of schedule. But if you're not in the industry and you're trying to get into the industry and you want someone to pair program with, rather than having to like seek out a real person, or just in a pinch, maybe the person, your mentor, is not available, you could pair program with an AI. You know, that's something that really wasn't possible, at least to my knowledge, just a few short years ago. And so, you know, is this a perfect solution? No, nothing is, right? Like even people aren't perfect in any case. But, you know, using AI to, you know, accelerate yourself moving forward and being able to quickly check on the answers of things and pair program it with it and ask it very specific things, which is honestly the thing that I use it the most for, is I'll have a very specific question about, hey, I have this code in this file. Does that make sense? And if I type that into Google, people are only talking about file structure and what the file structure should be. So now I have to go in, sift through the information and be like, oh, no, they're not using the same thing as me. Oh, this one is, but they don't have that file for some reason. That's a different version or whatever. But with the AI, it's able to seemingly sift through that information and say, yes, you can leave it here, but it isn't normally left here. Or sometimes it'll say being here or over here is fine. And that's a huge thing for me, because I've said it a million times on the show, but I get so upset when someone's like, use this code, and I read it and I understand it. And then I'm like, oh, great. Where do I put this? And I can't figure out where to put it. And I'm spending like hours, trial and error, making files. No, not there. Okay, over here. No, over here. Mess. So it makes a lot of sense to use an AI to get these insights and to be a bit of a coding partner if you need it.
Yep, exactly. Next thing here is find a group of better developers than you and don't be afraid to ask questions. So this one is big. Matt and I kind of started in a vacuum. We've mentioned this many times, where it was just Matt and I, and we were starting at the same level. And like, yes, we had each other, which was good, like better than zero, right? Like we still were able to bounce stuff off each other, get each other to troubleshoot each other's code. Like we had that that process was very great, like very good for both of us. But the fact is that we were on the same level, right? So if we had any serious questions, any questions that were above ourselves, we would either grind it out ourselves and try to figure it out with, you know, spending hours, sometimes days on forums, on Stack Overflow, just not asking anyone, just literally trying to grind it out ourselves, or we wouldn't get it done and we would try to go a different route. if we would have embraced the fact that we can find like developers with at a similar stage in their careers, maybe at a higher stage, lower stage, whatever, if we found the group of people that could be relied upon to ask questions and we could all ask questions of each other, I feel like that would have accelerated our development journey, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4x. When you have people that can answer a question for you in a matter of minutes that would have taken you hours and hours to go through, it accelerates, obviously, like just from that time frame, it accelerates you dramatically. And then having to, the practice of actually formulating the question correctly, and then having someone come back to you and be like, oh, that's kind of not, I don't think that works, or like, I don't think that's how you should ask it. You should ask it like this. Like just having that back and forth with someone that knows how to ask the right question, that itself would have been so invaluable. Because I think, honestly, some of the hardest things that I had to do was just figuring out what to type into Google. I just didn't know what to type. Like, I didn't know what was wrong with a thing. I didn't know if it was like 10 layers deep wrong. I didn't know if it was a surface layer issue. I didn't know if it was like, a package.json issue, a Vite issue, a Webpack issue, or was it a Svelte issue, a JavaScript issue? I had no idea what the problem, like core root of the problem was that I was trying to troubleshoot when I first started. So of course I was typing in nonsense into Google and getting nothing back. And then I would have to type in more nonsense until I got something relevant. And then I would have to go down the path of something relevant until I found the actual answer. That could have been, hey, that error is coming from the, React compiler. And that would have given me so much direct, like that phrase could have saved me hours. And I would have known after that, hey, these kinds of errors are coming from React. So it's just not having that earlier on in our career, or in my career specifically, definitely didn't do me any favors. Matt mentioned recently that, or just before this, that I think you use AI for stuff like that now, right? So we didn't have that obviously when we were starting, but I would definitely be leveraging that if you don't have a group of people. But I think it's still valuable for you to find that kind of like-minded group of developers that are willing to share, that are willing to like just hang out, just talk to them, because you're going to learn so much more than just getting troubleshooting answers. You're going to learn directions that people are taking, trends in the industry, what new technology is coming out, what people are passionate about. You might find situations where, someone's hiring, and if you prove that you're a good developer that's learning, that like friends help each other out. The reality of our industry is that it's very hard to break in, and if you have a good group of developers around you that you can trust and you talk to on a daily basis, if one of you finds a job, if a couple of you find a job and they see openings, they're bound to recommend people that they already know, because just half the battle with hiring is getting the right candidate. If you open up a post right now, you're going to get thousands. And that's useless for everyone. Useless for the candidates. It's useless for the company, because what do you do with 1,000 applications? Realistically, you cut them down by arbitrary metrics to the point where you can start reviewing them, maybe to the 100 or the top 50. Or I say top in quotes because there is no top 50 from a resume perspective. Like, you don't know what you're going to get. But if you have Joe working on the team and Lauren working on the team, and they're both recommending, Patrick, that they've worked with before, that they've done a project with before, that they've been in this group of developers before, that narrows it down. Like, boom. First of all, they already have synergy with some of the team members that are going to be joining. That's huge. Second of all, someone's vouching for their skills, which is really difficult to get. Like, a resume doesn't mean anything regardless of what they put on it, because until you get to the actual technical side of the interview, you don't know how good they are, if they match your stack or whatever. So in my opinion, this is one of the reason that I have it at the top here, like right after learn your tools, is because I think this is one of the most important ones. If you're looking to get a job in the industry, it's very difficult to do it alone. It's just practically impossible at this point, right? At where we are right now. Maybe in a year it'll be better because it goes through the ebbs and flows of the industry of how hiring is. Right now, it's practically impossible. If you have the right group of developers around you, if you have the right group of friends going through the same thing, I guarantee you it increases your chances.
It's a good point, because you and I would work on something again. We'd be in the same level, and then we'd have to grind it out more or less to like figure it out. And it reminds me of the story, I think it was on the podcast many years ago now, on like how I made this or something like that, where it was the host was talking to the creators, the original creators of Instagram. And there was a section of the show where they were talking about how before Facebook, which is now Meta, purchased them, they were just like working like crazy just to keep the servers up. And even though, it was obviously a team of developers, it reminds me of like they were in their own echo chamber. Like they didn't have that group of developers that was used to heavy traffic and whatever other problems they were having. And so these guys were, just grinding it out. And then they said it was a huge relief when, Facebook does the purchases the company, and then they send some of their engineers over. And they're like, man, we're having a hell of a time with this. Like, this is going to go down. Like, it's the traffic's up or like whatever. And Facebook guy goes, oh yeah, I've been there. I've done that before. I know what that is. And it's just sort of like, okay, good. Like, how do we fix it? And they've done it. They've dealt with it before. And then obviously Instagram is, pretty stable these days. It's like a one-to-one. Like, even if it's not individual to individual, an individual company, becomes that echo chamber where, Mike and I are like almost pumping each other up, if you will, in that like, oh, like we'll go grind it out. And like Mike finds a thread to pull on Google. So then he goes and does it. And so like, what do? Of course, like I follow him and double down on that research. And now we're in the wrong area. Maybe Mike saw that we should be using Squarespace or something like that. So he like really digs into researching Squarespace. And then I try to assist him. There's that echo chamber when in reality, we shouldn't even be making a website at all. We need to do something else, an entirely different thing, like a desktop app or something along those lines. And now we're both in the wrong. And so it doesn't, necessarily only apply to individuals. It does also apply to groups. And it makes a lot of sense to have some place to just ask the question. And I would like to say at this point that, don't be afraid to receive criticism, because like, some criticism, and Mike did mention this, some criticism is obviously good, but I want to make a point on this is that I don't want to say specifically the development community, but the internet, I suppose, community at large can be pretty dang harsh. It can be pretty critical. And we were just dealing with this, Mike and I is like, even clients can be pretty critical, and it starts kind of getting to you. And so, yeah, find a better group of better developers, or, find someone there to be almost like a mentor. However, I will say that it's easier said than done, because it can be pretty harsh out there, and the criticism can quickly become just that, criticism, not constructive criticism.
Yeah, the balance is really tough, and it's really tough. And this is another thing that like I just think if you have a really good group of people, don't be afraid to post your code in there. That's more the lesson that I've learned. Like, you need to find that group first, you need to trust them, and then you need to not be afraid to receive criticism from the group that you trust. But throwing your stuff out into the ether or to a group of new developers, like, yeah, like without the trust aspect of that, it becomes very iffy, because you could receive bad advice, you could receive bad criticism, you could receive negative, like very overly negative criticism for no reason. It could just take you down 15 different paths. So be careful with this one. I think, Matt, you made a good point there to bring that up. Like, be careful with not overly going down the weeds of just getting criticized all the time. That could burn you out easily if you're only receiving criticism. Make sure that you find people that will not only criticize, but they will compliment, because you need that balance. Like, when you're doing a code review, for instance, at a company, a lot of times if I find some negative stuff, I will balance that negative with like, hey, I like the way you implemented this. If I like the way they implemented it, right? Like, so I'll always try to balance when I'm giving a critical code review. Right. Like, it's one of those things that it's a human factor that isn't taken into account a lot of times, because code reviews inherently, they're awkward. Like, it's just awkward to tell people that they're doing things, or that there's a mistake here. Right. Like, that they're doing things wrong. Maybe sometimes they're just doing things that you wouldn't do yourself. And I try to get away from like giving those kinds of code reviews, but it takes skill. Like, it takes time to get to that point where you're not nitpicking. Right. And sometimes you'll get into that rhythm of like, you'll find someone that nitpicks everything. And yeah, you just can't deal. It's really tough to deal with. Another good use case for AI, by the way, like, throw your code at it, get Copilot or get ChatGPT to review it. It can give you some direction. It's not perfect in any way, shape, or form, but it can definitely give you some direction. And you can tell it what kind of criticism you want to receive. Do you want it to be overly critical? Do you want it to give you some compliments? Like, you can actually like prompt it. You can create a custom GPT even like a code reviewer GPT that gives you the exact kind of criticism that you want to receive when you give it something.
You know, this reminds me of like a personal story, actually, and that is that, you know, like how you were saying, even if like a particular code review or a particular review of anything professionally becomes too critical, it's like good to like sort of balance out the good with the bad. And it reminds me of this story I had in high school, actually, with an English professor or instructor, whatever you want to call him, where my friend and I, like, it was like grade 11, I want to say. So we've been in high school for about 3 years and in our third year. And like our essays were just like maxing out. Like, obviously you're writing essays. You've been writing essays since later elementary school. So since grade like 7 and 8. And like he would just always give us 70, 70, 70 type thing. And we were like, okay, like we need help. Like what the hell's going on? Like we want to up this grade because it's like hitting a ceiling. And like the way that he did it is he was just like, the way that you're writing this is very robotic and it's very like elementary school. And he's like, that's not like a ding on you. He's like, it's just that they taught you this like 5-paragraph, very strict and stringent way to do it. And so then when he was like, okay, like, you know, come during lunch hour and like come and help, like I'll come to my classroom and I'll give you some help. So we did that. And he was like, what we're going to do is we're going to like start teaching you some basic concepts that seem like I'm talking to you like a fool or like an idiot. But what we're doing is we're starting at the beginning to erase what the elementary school sort of process has taught you, because I don't like, that's not how you should be. Like that foundational knowledge was not good anymore. Like it was out of date or whatever. We're going to break that down and then we're going to like teach you the new stuff. And then slowly but surely you'll be taught new stuff and you'll have this, you'll hopefully start getting better grades. And the way he approached that always kind of stuck with me, because I thought if a teacher who was like, you know, more strict or more of a jerk, let's say, were to come at you and be like, you guys are writing this all wrong. It's totally wrong. I don't know what you're doing. We need to start at the beginning because you don't know what you're doing. Versus saying, hey, we're going to start at the beginning because we need to like erase this programming in your brain. And this is why. And it's like, oh, okay. Like, so it's not really like my fault. It's like, okay, the education system taught it that way. That's just not the way it's done anymore. It's been updated. Okay, cool. Let's go through it and let's go do it. And it's like, that was a highly critical time, right? Not the greatest grades, I guess you could say, if you don't like 70s, not the greatest grades, but also like you're maxing out your grades. And you're also, when you go to get help, you need to go back to like a grade 7 level and build it back up. That's a highly critical like session of discussion, but like was balanced out properly, right? Was balanced out to say, okay, like you're not an idiot. It's just that this happened. So this is how we're going to approach it. And that is like always stuck with me as like, this is kind of how you do like really critical reviews of stuff. And obviously not everything's an English essay. So the way you handle it will be a little bit different depending on what it is. But like just sitting there and like screaming or having like the elitist attitude of like, well, if you were better, it would be better. It's like, okay, well, I mean, if you were better, it would be better. Like, you want to have like if you were better fight, like, what are we arguing about? And so like just that way of like handling the criticism really stuck with me. And then we started doing way better. And it's like completely changed how we write essays.
Yeah, I mean that's the sign of a good teacher. If you can give out the criticism and are able to bring someone back up while you're doing it, that's a really key skill that not everyone has. And that, again, just be okay with receiving criticism, but when you find it gets to you, like let your own self balance or your own thoughts like kind of power it through, because like if your head is in a bad place, don't ask for criticism, right? Try to get yourself back up and then ask for some criticism. Tell people the kind of criticism you want to receive, like be upfront about the fact that, hey, I'm a little bit gentle right now, whatever. Like some people might not like that. Who cares? The fact is that I think it's still important to receive criticism because that you can grow like that way. But like Matt said, balance it. Find someone that can balance it or use AI.
Find someone that can balance it or use AI.
Find someone that can give good criticism. Like the reason I'm like hesitating because it's extremely difficult to find someone that can give good criticism in this kind of scenario. Like I say it like, get criticism and stuff like that, but it's really tough advice because you're not going to find someone that's that good. Like it's very, very difficult. Like even a really good group of developers that you trust, none of them might be good at it. Like it's a very difficult skill. I don't know. Try it. Don't wear yourself out because of it. Next thing here is create snippets and starters from common patterns to implement. So as you go through your journey, you'll find that if you like React or if you like Svelte, you'll create different patterns for how you handle state management in a component, across components, how you create how you like change a word from being lowercase to all uppercase, how you breaking a word into kebab case. Like there's going to be these little utilities that you're going to have to write on a consistent basis, depending on the projects you work on. What I wish I did was instead of rewriting them every time, I wish I put them into a library of snippets. I wish I started creating a library of snippets early on, because it's a kind of a double focus here. One thing is that, hey, you're creating reusable things that you can use in all your projects. On the second thing is that when you're creating these functions for the library, you're forced to think of them in a more abstract way and a more general way. And you're forced to architect them to be used in multiple projects. And that makes you a better developer. When you start to abstract away a lot of the specificity that like a component requires in a particular project, and you create functions that can work across maybe even different frameworks, or you create functions that can work in different whatever, like it just makes you think about programming in a different way. And I think that alone, the library is great, but that different mindset when you're creating this library makes you a better developer down the line. And I think it kind of dovetails into maybe even open sourcing some of your patterns, because when you start to use a pattern, like when you start to use, like maybe you make a little library that, takes in a string and outputs a string in kebab. I'm giving really general, really stupid examples, but like just a library that you could see that you would reuse across different projects. When you create it for yourself, you first do it kind of hacky. You just get it working for your one project. Then you extrapolate that out and make it work across multiple projects. And the natural progression is like, hey, like if it works for me, why don't I make it so that everyone else can do it? Right? Like we had Puro on the show. That's what he did. He created a library that just shoots confetti in Svelte. Like you just call it and confetti appears on your screen wherever you call it. Like you can position it however you want. And he did that for himself initially, but the reality is like, hey, I'm sure everyone else wants to shoot confetti on, course, like they finish a lesson or something like that, shoot confetti. Someone signs up for your page. Maybe they want to shoot confetti. Like there's a million different reasons you want to have like a little bit of a reward factor on a website. And he extrapolated it out, created this confetti library, and it's being used like thousands and thousands of people, like something as simple as that. And he had to go through the process of figuring out how to create that library, open source that library, put it on NPM so it's installable, update that library. All of that whole process from a simple library that shoots confetti makes you a way better developer. And it connects you to the best people, because the people who are going to be using it are going to be reaching out to you. The people that like just in the community of the whatever technology you're building, like Svelte, are going to reach out to you. And again, like it made him a lot of connections. Like he built out a couple of different components, like a couple of different projects that were open sourced from stuff that he himself was using. And that has opened doors for him in different categories of his like career. So it's something that I didn't do enough of. I think I created like one or two little libraries. One of them was like a little toast notification library. Never really promoted it that much. I can't remember if there's anything else that I created, but like I just didn't do it enough. And I take that on myself. Like it sucks. I wish I did. I think it would have opened more doors. I think it would have made me a better developer, but it's something that I would definitely do today if I had to go back, because I know that, again, the connections that you make through that, the learnings that you have of creating something that has to be reusable is huge for when you're interviewing for a job and they're like, well, how would you architect this so that we could use it across different projects? You can be like, well, I created this library and I use it across different projects. That's proof right there. Proof is in the pudding.
I have a question about this. We recommend people make content if they are able to expand their portfolio effectively, but also to expand their connections if it starts picking up viewership. And I had an idea. I'm just going to run this by you live because it's about this. And it was that as I write CSS tutorials, my thought was, I'm just sort of writing these small snippets everywhere, and some of them are literally one line, so maybe those ones wouldn't apply. But ones that are, several lines and maybe several different snippets of code, I thought it would make sense. This might be stupid. It might make sense to go onto GitHub, create a repo for that, and then have like the lessons be what I push. So you have like lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, lesson 4, for example, or not even, in a course format. It would just be the name of the blog post, the name of the guide, because I'm kind of all over the place. Is that weird? Like, is that foolish? Would people absorb that? The reason why I say that is because that would be a way for people to store their snippets. If they're learning development, they are getting these snippets. There is some version control there now if you need it. And some of the stuff might just be for them. But if they notice people are giving them stars or whatever because they have like a little, tutorial bit of like code that they have stored away. I don't know if that would require you to also have the README then reflect that. Like, this is sort of a loose idea that I've had for a while, and I just don't know whether this is kind of that would be the place to do it, or whether just the blog is just the place to do that.
Well, there's many different paths you can take with that. Like, I like the idea of combining them. So GitHub would be where you obviously do all of your actual code storage, but you could even have it like GitHub has an open API. The blog, a README for something can just be Markdown, right? You could even have a Markdown file inside of your repo that you could read like on a consistent basis inside of every one of your repos. That could be the blog post. So all of your structure could be like essentially your CMS could be GitHub. And then you just build the front end of that to pull in the relevant information for each one of your projects, whether it be the README or a separate like blog folder with the README of the blog in there. And then you have everything kind of linked together. And essentially you would just create a new when you create a new project, you label everything correctly and it would be automatically pulled in to this website that you created.
Oh, that's fascinating. Okay.
Yeah. So like that's totally a good use case for some like a combination of all these things, right? Like, so now you have a blog that's automatically generated from the stuff that you're creating. Now you have proof that you've created this thing that can connect to GitHub. You can intake an API. GitHub API is great, but it has some caveats to it that are really interesting. And like proving that you can work with the GitHub API is actually kind of like a good skill to have, especially in API land. Like if you you have to authenticate into GitHub, you have to handle that authentication token. You have to handle the rate limiting, which is a really interesting aspect of GitHub. And I mean, like it's not that hard for like a blog perspective because you're not hitting the post a million times. Usually you would just hit it once and it would cache. But like there's little things in the GitHub API that are really interesting to learn. And again, that's a really standard, like your blog that connects to GitHub as the CMS is a standalone project, like a great standalone project, in my opinion, that you can talk about it during interviews and you can present. But all the other projects that are automatically creating pages on that blog are there too. And again, all visible on how you created them, all their commit history is there. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of ways you could do it, but finding that like unique kind of routes to display your content and to connect with the community is key, is very, very key. And if you can think outside the box, that'll show everyone else that you can, obviously, and it might set you apart.
Okay. That took a much more advanced angle, but an angle that I didn't realize was possible. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Because I thought about the same thing too. Like I thought about like doing something like that before, but the reality is like at this point in where I am right now in coding, like I have a full-time role. I have all the stuff that we do for HTML things. We have like the side bit, the business, like the actual business of Digital Dynasty Design. It's just like I can't make my own portfolio. Like I can't make my own blog right now. Like it's just not in the cards. If I ever get the time, it's probably a route that I'll take. Next thing here is dive deeper into the tools that you're using. So the tools in this case are different from the first point. This is more like dive deeper into the tech that you're using. I'm actually going to change that live in the show notes, not confuse myself, but essentially whatever framework you've picked, whatever framework is popular at the time, that's the one that I usually recommend to pick if you're looking for a job as quickly as possible. Whatever, language you're using, if it's JavaScript, Python, whatever, I recommend you to dive deep into it. And what does that mean? Well, that means that, hey, like there's a million different ways you could build a website. There just is like a million different ways. There's like hundreds or thousands of different frameworks that you can use. You can server-side render everything and send it all off into the front end from the back end and stuff like that. And that's fine. Like there many different ways. And you can learn a bunch of different ways of how to do it. You can become a generalist. That's kind of the route that I took. Like I did it. I've created apps and websites dozens, if not maybe even close to 100 different ways at this point. And until recently, until the last like 4 years, 3 years, I didn't dive deep, or dive deep enough, I should say. And upon diving deeper into Svelte, specifically in SvelteKit, I realized what I was missing. Because yes, there's like the surface level of all these frameworks is fine, and you can get a lot done that way. But until you dive deeper into the intricacies of all the integrations that they have, of how they handle different kinds of like, life cycle events, of how they handle all the different side edge cases of a website or a web application, you don't understand fully how it works. You don't understand that you could be doing things in a very inefficient way. And for the most part, I will say that I was doing things in an efficient way. It didn't really matter for the most part. I wasn't dealing with a website that needed to be up 100% of the time and needed to be hit by a million different people at once. So the inefficiencies that I had in my code 5 years ago didn't particularly matter so much. But when you start going the route of, hey, I need higher availability, I need to understand how to get the most performance out of this because a lot of people are hitting it at the same time. I need to distribute the data in a proper way. I need to handle security. And this is a big one, security. If you don't understand something deeply, you could leave yourself open to a lot of vulnerabilities, like session-based cookie stealing. Like if you handle authentication wrong and accidentally pass tokens to the front end when they should be only on the back end, that can easily happen in today's JavaScript heavy full stack environment because like the front end and the back end meld together so closely that I've seen this happen on several times, and I've even done it, and I've had a security audit catch it, thankfully, before putting it into production, where like there was customer data leaking to the front end that shouldn't be leaking. And that just comes from not knowing something deep enough, like not understanding the concept of how a server-side session can store data and how you can choose to send certain information. Like if you need an email on the front end for a user rather than all users, you can choose to send that information to that particular user from a session rather than sending like an array of all your users to the front end and then choosing and picking based on who's logged in. Like that can happen. So this is a more intricate one. I'm just trying to give an example of something that is relevant to what I went through and what I realized as I didn't have that like kind of context when learning a full stack framework.
Well, one easy one that you and I have discussed in the past is how easy would it be for someone to just do JavaScript based authentication? Now that might sound stupid, but if you look at someone who's just getting started, they've just done their vanilla, like they're doing the vanilla stuff. They just finished their HTML. They just finished their CSS learning, right? Or at least completed it to a point where they're happy with it. And then they just get started with JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript, and they start, messing with stuff, making things animate, moving things around, making decisions, right, with logic that is code. And then they think to themselves, well, hang on a second, I can create like a password protected area. I can actually just have a list of users and I can have an array and like blah, 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 and all the rest of it. And like, why isn't this okay? Like, why can't I just have a password that is there? And they might look it up and people will say, well, you can do an inspect element. And you might think, well, if someone opens up the inspect element or the dev tools of the browser, like who's going to do that? Just devs. Like no one's going to really do that. And that's a security problem, right? Like that is absolutely a security problem. However, if you know this stuff deeper, you're going to know right away that just plain old JavaScript isn't going to cut it for a secure authentication. However,
front end JavaScript, I just want to be clear because
vanilla,
there is back end, vanilla like front end HTML. Yeah, sorry.
This is but you're right. Like this stuff is getting okay. Correct. Vanilla front end, like vanilla front end JavaScript is what I'm talking about. Is like it's not going to cut it for secure authentication. However, if it's easy to implement, it is completely fine for gatekeeping. What I mean by that is we've had clients where they just purely for gatekeeping's sake, they're just messing with a feature and they don't know if they like it yet. But if a customer sees it, it's not a big deal. Quick little JavaScript password, someone breaks in, have at it, man. You're looking at two titles for some reason. Not a big deal. Like I've done that several times for people. Just a quick little dirty JavaScript thing. If you break into it, you're getting public information. Have a great day. But it's just it's just for gatekeeping. Completely, like just solely for gatekeeping, or to keep Google out is a classic one, or something like that, right? Just something where, again, this stuff deep enough and you realize like, okay, And like, I know it deep enough to understand that like I can do that just for quick and dirty things that don't matter. But if I need proper authentication, I'm either going to go to an authentication provider, like some sort of web app, or I better learn it well. Like, I know enough to say I better learn that well because I don't know it well enough right now.
Yeah. And again, like, I think just diving deeper into something is going to get you further. And what I mean by that is like you'll become quote unquote an expert in a topic. If you're an expert in React, for instance, that's a very popular framework right now. If you're an expert in React and you can answer questions easily, you can, solve problems quickly, opportunities will open up for you really quickly. And it's not just in React. That's another thing that I want to be very clear here. When you start understanding the core concepts, when you dive deep enough to start understanding how React works, right? And that eventually you'll get there. As crazy as it is, maybe what you're at right now, where you're just kind of like playing around with the API and stuff like that. If you go deep enough, if you use it on a big enough project, on a couple of projects, you'll start understanding what it's doing. That knowledge transfers very well to pretty much any other framework. The frameworks handle things differently. Like there's a shadow DOM for React. There isn't a shadow DOM for Svelte. But overall, they're just manipulating the DOM. There's like a diff that's going on. Like it's doing different kinds of ways of hooking into the life cycle of a component of the page, et cetera, et cetera. Like you'll start seeing the patterns that appear across all of these frameworks, and they'll all start to meld together to the point where you're like, everyth's just syntax now. I know how to solve this problem. I know what I need to implement from these frameworks to solve this problem. I can just look that up in the documentation to figure out what I need to do. But the reality is that I know how to implement it. I know what it is that needs to be implemented. And that's like 90% of the battle. Figuring out what you actually like. Do you use an effect here? Like, do you like in the React world, use effect is treated as this thing, like as like an on mount a lot of times, right? As something that you would use on a pretty consistent basis. But the reality is that you shouldn't treat it like as an on mount. There's certain like use effects should be used very sparingly and only in certain situations where you really need to follow a piece of data as it changes, and need to actually do an effect on that data, like change that data in some way when it changes, or have some sort of a hook that can detect the data change and then have a reaction to that effect, whatever. But people will just use it as a crutch, and myself included. When I first started React, I used it a hell of a lot as a crutch because it was the on mount equivalent. But there's different ways you can do it, better, more efficient ways. So you find these little things that make you understand development in a different way only by going deep. And I want to make that very clear. Like going at it from the surface level, understanding the root level of the API, that's good. And again, it got me pretty far, but it did not get me close enough to where I need to be.
That's something that just, again, comes with expertise, but it also comes from that AI conversation I had earlier, where the AI is able to sort of sift through the data and understand what it is exactly that you're talking about. Like when I ask about a specific question about a specific this bit of code in this file in this directory. Yes, I'm old. I say directory, not folder. In this folder, is that okay? And that's something where I know enough to ask that question. I do not know enough to know the answer, but the AI is able to give me that like a mentor would. And so it's almost like you're talking to someone who has kind of dug deep, and it's not perfect. And then people aren't perfect either. I'm sure there's people out there implementing things in an extremely foolish manner. I assure you that's happening. And I assure you I've done it as well. But it is just something else that's kind of that AI can help you do, is to help you dig deeper or consult, quote unquote, someone that has dug deeper.
Yep, exactly. Next thing here is embrace imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is something that will kind of hit you throughout different stages of your career, where you'll feel like you're not ready for a certain role, where you're not ready for the current role you're in, where like you have a lot of missing information that you just don't know, and you're falling behind on technology and stuff like that. Like it'll just keep nagging on you as your career progresses. Like you think at some point you'll be like, I know like 10 times more than I did 5 years ago. How can I possibly still have imposter syndrome? But the reality is you still will, because it's your own brain going, you can learn more, you can learn more, you can learn more, right? And it's like for a lot of people that doesn't stop. That's like it's the same thing with like hitting a milestone. Like you hit a milestone and you don't even feel it. Like something like hitting, for us, like to bring it to the podcast example, like we hit 300 podcast episodes recently. And we just kind of like, yeah, we did like that one episode, that podcast episode, but like we just kind of kept going, Matt and I. And we're just like trying to think of the next 300 or the next couple episodes. We're not stopping to admire the fact that, hey, we got to 300. Like that's a pretty big achievement. Honestly, like that's a pretty big achievement. I would love to know the percentage of podcasts that get to 300 episodes is probably very small. And if we cared, and if we didn't have imposter syndrome, which we absolutely do, we would probably have stopped and been like, let's, embrace this. Let's figure out, the achievement that we had, but we didn't, because I think Matt and I, even on the podcast itself, have imposter syndrome. And what I think what this point that I am bringing up now is really talking about is the fact that it's inevitable. So you have to learn to embrace it. And embracing it doesn't mean to succumb to it. It doesn't mean to be like, okay, imposter syndrome is forever. I'm just going to like suck forever. The reality is that imposter syndrome is a way for you to just drive yourself to continue to learn. And if you embrace it from a positive angle of, hey, my brain is telling me that I need to learn more. Like embrace it. Be like, fuck yeah. Like, yeah, I need to get better. Like I'm good at Svelte. I'm not good enough. Like, period. That's how I feel right now. Like I'm just talking realistically. I'm pretty good at it. I'm not good enough. I need to learn more. I don't see that as a negative anymore. I see that as a way for me to take the next step forward, again, to go deeper and learn the next APIs, do the migration to Svelte 5, find better patterns for certain things that I'm doing, get better, right? If you let imposter syndrome bring you down to the point where you're just like, well, I'm never going to be good, that will give you the opposite effect of like, okay, well, I just need to stagnate and that's it. Or like, I'm just going to get depressed or I'm going to burn out. Right. But if you learn to embrace it and you learn to turn it into a positive, because it's going to happen anyway, then you can get better and maybe learn to not appreciate it, but maybe learn to mitigate it a little bit as well. Because you don't want to constantly be in this mode of like, I need to get better. I need to get better. I need to get better. That's bad. You need to make sure that it's happening in rhythms or in blocks of time so that you're able to still appreciate how far you've come. You're able to still apply your skills. You're able to, figure out what you need to get better on. If you're at this point where imposter syndrome is preventing you from doing that, then you're approaching burnout. So acknowledging that imposter syndrome is okay, figuring out a way to twist it into something better, and also making sure that you're not at the point where it's always constantly on your mind. Those are the three things that I want to kind of emphasize. And none of these are easy, for sure. But if you're getting to the point where it's always imposter syndrome, then you need to step back. You need to figure out what's causing that, right? Like, because that could be a different symptom. That could be a symptom of just, I don't know, some sort of depression of some sorts. I'm not a mental health expert in any way. Figure that, like, you can ask the professionals on that. But like, it could be a different symptom that's causing it rather than the typical, hey, this is typical imposter syndrome. I'm taking on a task that's a little bit too big for my knowledge, but I can learn it. Like just confidence building. So it's not an easy one to figure out, but I think acknowledging that it exists is the first step for sure.
I have a practical and a philosophical bit of advice on this, and I'll start with the practical one. Pretty simply, is that one of the things that I always used to struggle with and still struggle with occasionally, but not all the time, is I would struggle with sort of thinking like, I need to get more done today. I need to get more done today. I need to get more done today. I didn't finish enough today. That type of question would always be nagging. And what I started doing was I have a work logbook where I literally just jot down. It's only for me. It's nothing formal. What I did that day. And I can see from looking at it in the one note that I have it in is that there's not that many entries because I only do it. Again, it's for me. It's when I'm thinking like every day there's like a consistent, 3 or 4 days where I'm like, I'm not getting enough done. I'm not getting enough done. I'm not getting enough done. I will then start this again and I'll do this for a few days. Then I'll stop. And it might be a year, it might be a month, whatever, until I come and revisit it. But it helps me because I write it down, right. Then I go like, oh my God, like I had 5 calls today. I did this, that, the other thing. I context switched 4 times, whatever. And it's like, what for me, it's like imposter syndrome in that, like, obviously I'm running the business. I'm doing a lot of things And I'm just sort of like, but like I didn't sit at my desk for the full 9 hours and didn't get up. Like I got up and walked around once, or I went up and like had some lunch or something. And I really should be just like sitting here doing it. Like there's so much work to be had. Like, what am I doing? But when I see it in writing, or even while I'm writing it, especially, I'm like, oh my God, like I'm on task 7. Like like, what have I been doing here? Like I'm actually doing pretty good. So that's a practical bit of advice. The more, I guess, philosophical or discussion one is actually something that you and I did, Mike. I don't know if you remember this. We used to do a pre-show before the episode. We used to post those on Patreon. It was a short-lived thing. But one of the before the shows is what we called it, is it's time to be proud of our work. And I remember recording it. I have the write up here. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but like from my memory, which is not perfect, I remember us saying things like, there's a bit of a problem with what we do, is that, like, you know, we're working in an industry that we're interested in. It's in tech, and we're interested in tech on and off the books sort of thing. And what, like, at least what I do is I do a task, pray that there's nothing wrong. And if there's nothing wrong, I go, woo, okay, cool. And then I move on. And I never take a step back, and I still do this. I never take a step back and go, that was a cool thing I built, or like, that was a cool web page, or I'm glad that that's live and that's helping that person. There's a few instances in which I've done that for sure. And I don't want to be the person that pats myself on the back for days, but at the same time, I'm always like working on something, stressed out that it's going to go wrong. If it does go wrong, I freak out even more than fix it. And then it's okay. Or I do it, it doesn't go wrong, and then I'm okay. But I'm never like, man, let's get this page up and running. This is going to be super cool and so awesome and stuff like that. I'm never that person. And it's probably a problem, actually, a little bit. Where like I'm in that cycle, right, of imposter syndrome, or of like not being proud of our work, right? Where I'm just sort of, it's weird to say I'm not proud of it. It's that I try to do it to like a perfectionist level sometimes. And I'm like pretty harsh on myself with stuff. I'm like, oh my God, I forgot some. Just before this show, I forgot to like put some links in to a web page, and I was just like, man, like what an idiot, you know? And like that's me. Like, meanwhile, I built a whole, I'm not going to like say who it is, but like I built a whole new experience for a client that should be much better for SEO. It is objectively much better for performance. It's more modern looking. It's like, there's all this stuff, but I'm just sort of like, like at least it didn't go too wrong. Like that's my feedback of like that's my own brain's feedback. And then I'm on to the next thing and hoping that doesn't go wrong. And it's a vicious cycle of that. And like that really, I think, I'm not a mental health expert either, but I think from my own experience that for me, it is imposter syndrome, where I feel like I'm still the student or the co-op on the team or something, right? Where I'm still in that role where I'm like, I hope the boss is like this. Meanwhile, if like I had to, for some reason, build a whole business out, e-commerce, blah, 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 I could do that. I know how to do that. And like, that's pretty cool if you think about the skill set, but I'm just sort of always like, no, like I just did some work today. I don't know if I'm the Eeyore of the web development world.
I think, yeah, I remember recording that episode. I remember recording that before the show. By the way, if you want us to bring back before the show, reach out. Totally willing to do it if we get enough feedback. But yeah, at HTML everything on X or Twitter, at HTML things on Instagram. Reach out and let us know. We can totally do that. We can add it to our Patreon if you sign up. But having said that, I remember recording that episode. I think we're kind of both the same in that sense. Like we both don't really celebrate our achievements. We both don't really acknowledge our accomplishments. We both try to kind of like just get better all the time, but like beat each other down. I think you a little bit more than me, maybe just because you haven't had the right, like the best experience with some clients, which is more on the client side of things, because what you've given them is good, like really good work. And then you've worked with people that just don't appreciate that kind of things. They'll just like essentially accept it and then just move on to the whatever is next on their list of things that they need to do. Whereas like a more company-wide setting where it's more traditional to give like encouragement, I've been in that a little bit longer. So that's helped me with a little bit of my confidence at least. But I still have the exact same thing where I just like anything I build, I still think is kind of, someone could build it better. And taking on hard tasks, I still have that thing, the voice in the back of my head being like, you can't do this, you're an idiot. And I don't know if that's ever going to go away. So again, I've just accepted it, and I've learned to embrace it a little bit. And if it's there, I'm just like, okay, well, that means that I'm moving in a direction that is challenging me, and that's okay. I'm just going to accept that challenge, and worst case scenario, I can't complete it, and I'll figure that out if it happens. If I can, then great. But I think it's still important for us to sit back and enjoy some of the things that we've accomplished. That I think that the reason for that episode still stands today. We have not done that enough.
Yeah, not. I mean, for me, probably not at all.
Yeah, exactly.
It's definitely like some, to kind of get more personal, I guess it's definitely a bit, because some clients are definitely either very monotone, which is fine. Like, I'm not saying they have to pat me on the back or anything. This is like a me problem, not necessarily a client problem. But some clients are damn well brutal. Like, they're very brutal and they're very blunt. And they will gaslight the hell out of you to get some free stuff, which is not good, which we've identified and like gotten better as business people and being like, hey, man, we did what you asked. So I'm not doing that for free. But it's still like it's like, oh, that person's mad now. That's always in the back of your head. Like, that person's pissed. Hopefully the next job's better. And it's definitely like a weird, actually, like you and I were talking, Mike, like a few weeks, probably a few months ago now. I think it was around Christmas, where you were like, man, like we built this Chromebook game. And like we built this Chromebook game, and it's like a fully fledged like clicker. It's like, pretty basic in that way, but it's a clicker Chromebook game, and it works. And like we made a little bit of money off of it. And like it was, whatever, like it was a good app. And it's just sort of like, you were like, man, like this is potentially like the best thing we've ever built to completion. Like, why don't we build things? And I was just like, well, we got all this other stuff. And it's like, oh yeah. And then we just kind of snap back to like the daily grind. And it's just sort of like, now that was a good time that we didn't acknowledge at the time. And when we tried to acknowledge it, we just were like, and then move back on to like, well, better get this staff bar working for Bill, or I don't know, making stuff up, whoever. It's weird. And like I often think in my own head that like the only way I'm going to get there is if I build like a cool personal project. But then whenever I work on a personal project, I'm like, man, this is a waste of time. I may as well work on a client one. So it's like, I don't know what's going on.
It's such a weird feeling, because I agree with you. Like that game. I still think about that game sometimes. And it was just like a stupid little clicker game. There was a lot of JavaScript behind it. There was a lot of really cool layout technology. There was a lot of really cool everything, right? Like it was a game, a full-fledged game, start to finish with a game, like extra game plus essentially as well, that you could play forever. We have to think out a lot of things, and I do one of the last points, and the last point I'll talk about actually is I do wish we completed more projects. I wish that we took things to completion. I wish that we did found an idea, went all the way through it, tried to deploy it, monetize it, whatever, and then moved on to the next one. Once we knew if it didn't work out on a more consistent basis. Like we did it with a few projects, but like you said, we kind of like, as soon as we got busy with real work, we stopped doing that. And I mean, that's fine. Like we made money, like we got paid for what we were doing. And that was kind of the goal of those projects early on, which was achieved. But they were probably some of the most fun I had during like doing web development. And
that's true, man.
Yeah, I think finding that fun and finding that passion of building stuff when you have the time to do it is something I regret not doing more often. And I wish I did more of. And I think, again, those projects can bring you together. If you build on your own, that's great. But a lot of times, if you find the right people, again, if I go back to find a group of developers, sometimes you can find something common between you two that you want to build, like gaming site or game, or just an app that you think would benefit someone or a group of people. And that process of working together on something can be something really beneficial for everyone. You can learn how to work together on a project because, version control, deployments, figuring out testing environments, how does it work on Matt's computer, how it works on my computer is different sometimes. All that stuff is really key when you're trying to get a job, because without it, you're kind of getting thrown into the deep end. Because when you go to a workplace, there's going to be a million different processes. There's going to be tons of different technology that you'll have to learn alongside this collaboration aspect of development, which is on its own not very simple. Git on its own is a whole course you could take to figure out how to use it effectively. I haven't taken one, but there is tons of them out there. And without actually using it for a purpose, it's tough to figure out why you need it. Yeah, I don't know. I'll leave it at that. But like, that's probably one of my bigger regrets is that we didn't do more of those. And that's not to say we might not in the future. Like maybe we'll have a situation where we can focus more on projects. Hopefully, you know, with HTML, all the things growing and monetization working in different ways, that will become a reality at some point. But yeah, I wish we did it earlier on too.
It's kind of like an enjoy the, I mean, it's kind of, well, it is cliche, I guess, but it's like enjoy the process. Like it's the journey, not the destination in a way, where it's like we were always like, let's build this. And it's like, yeah, but is it going to make money? I don't know. Okay, let's just try to get a client because like that's going to pay us. And there's like a real world implication there. Like obviously we needed money, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, but like that could have made something or that could have taught us something or got us contacted with somebody. And you just don't see that, you know, when you're in that echo chamber, really.
Yep. But yeah, I think that's it for things that I wish I did. If you have any of your own, again, feel free to contact us on any of our socials. I would love to hear from you. And anything else on your side, Matt?
No, I think that is it for me. I've gotten philosophical enough. Misty-eyed even. No, I'm not getting misty-eyed. Relax. But but no, thanks for listening. If you have anything else you want to add to this episode or think we should talk about, like absolutely reach out. I'm on Threads. I'm on the Instagram. Mike's on the Twitter or the X, whatever. I don't know what you're supposed to call it. It's stupid. I know it is X, dumb. But like dumb. It's just not going to get into it. So anyway, if you want to, give us some feedback or give us some things that you think that other developers should, hindsight's 2020. Like, what do you think you should have did when you were a junior? If you're no longer a junior, for example, please let us know. But remember, if you want to support the show, you can do that on Patreon. That is patreon.com/HTML, all the things. Check out the tiers and give that a go. And many thanks to our $3 tier patrons. Tim from the Web Hacker on thewebhacker.com. Jason from Geek Life Radio via geekliferadio.com. Fire and Season via fireandseason.com. Garrett Segal, Level Up Financial Planning via www.levelupfinancialplanning.com, and Joshua via silvio.us. Also remember that you can support your own learning journey and support the show by using our Scrimba affiliate link. Go and check out their courses. Go and see what they got going on with their interactive media player code editor. Link will be in the show notes on htmlallthethings.com as well as in the show description, if your podcast app supports that kind of thing. And last but not least, we'd like to give a shout out to Michael LaRocca, a contributing author on htmlallthethings.com. Michael is the author of Self-Taught the X Generation blog at selftaughttxg.com. Feel free to leave a comment or a review on the platform that you are listening to this on. And this outro will sign us off.
You've been listening to HTML All the Things Podcast. Web development, web design, and small business. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we hope you appreciate that we talk to you like human beings. And we hope you had some fun. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on social media. On Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon at HTML All the Things. And on Twitter at HTML Everything. Until next time, this is HTML All the Things, signing off.